Well, good morning, Northview. How are you guys doing this morning? It's good to see you. It's great to be connecting with everybody who's online, joining us as well today. If you have a Bible with you or a Bible app on your phone, Galatians 6 is where we're going to begin today. We're going to continue in our series called Body Language, looking at the one another's of Scripture. When I was growing up in this little bitty church in southeast Iowa, one of the more memorable Bible stories that just captivated my attention as a kid was a story that's told in the book of Exodus, connected to the people of God after being delivered from Egypt. Moses is leading the people through the desert to the promised land. And on that journey from deliverance to the promised land, right smack dab in the middle of God's will, with God's leader leading them, they're attacked. The Amalekite army attacks them, and this battle ensues. Now, interesting thing about the battle that was made this part of why this story was memorable was that the rise and fall of the battle was tied to the rise and fall of Moses' arms. Like quite literally, as he held a staff in his arm, when his arms were up in the air, the Israelites would be winning. But when he would get tired, as anyone's arms would eventually, his arms would start to come down, and as his arms came down, they would start losing. You can just kind of just picture this battle in your mind. It's like, we're winning, we're losing, we're winning, we're losing. And so obviously figuring this out, there needs to be a way to get the arms up in the air and keep them up in the air. So two men, one named Aaron and the other named Hur, H-U-R, come alongside Moses. Moses sits down on a rock, and those two guys stand up on either side of him and literally just prop his arms up so they can't come down. And they hold him until the battle's won. I think maybe even more captivating than the story itself was the community of faith that I learned that story inside of. As I reflect back on my faith journey, I think I could safely say that I fell in love with the church before I fell in love with Jesus. I was connected into a family and a group of people who would do anything for each other and who regularly went above and beyond to make sure that people were taken care of. Like the story in the desert, I learned some lessons about faith through this small little community, this little church. I learned that sometimes following after God even, life can come under attack. Just because you're in the middle of God's will doesn't mean it's going to be easy every step of the way. I learned also that good leaders need help. That the story of that battle would have been very different had Moses been by himself. That without Aaron and Hur, there might have been a different outcome. The combination of that story and my experience growing up in that church gave me a perspective on community that I've never forgot. I feel like every day I wake up like I stepped off the bus for the game and I know we're going to win. I know we're going to win. I don't think we'll pitch a shutout every single day. I don't think the other team won't score sometimes. I don't even think that it's going to be easy. There's going to be some pain. There's going to be some difficulties. But I wake up every day knowing, because of my relationship with Jesus and the family that I have, not only my biological family, but the church family, we're winning in the end. Amen. We're winning. And as I reflect on that confidence and that place that came from, and where my experience at church connected into, like, how did that even come about? I can't help but see, like in the book of Acts, chapter 4 and 5, 2, 3, 4, and 5, where the early church gathered together in such a way, and this is like when they became an immediate revolution, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 people. And yet, maybe the most incredible thing said about the early church in those formative months was that there were no needy persons among them. That's wild to think about. In a community of thousands, there were no needy people among them. Now, understand, that doesn't mean literally no one ever had a need. What it means is no one who had a need had that need go unmet. When the need came up, people from within the community took care of things for them. That sets the stage for what we're talking about today. Because the verse and the one another that we're going to focus on today is Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, where it says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. There's 100 one another's in Scripture. Almost 70 of them are directly a command for the people of God to either do something with one another, to one another, or not to do something to one another or with one another for the sake of building an unshakable community of faith. This one today is one of the ones we're going to zero in on. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. The word for bear in the original Greek language means to carry off, to pick up and carry away. The word for burden means weight. And the tense that the verse is written in means to do something and keep on doing. So to put it all together, to be a burden bearer means to lift the weight that is on other people and continue lifting the weight that is on other people. That's the call that God put on his church, to be burden bearers for one another, to lift weights, to carry weights off, and to keep lifting weights and carrying weights off. So what I'm telling you is we're going to talk about being bodybuilders today. We're going to talk about being weightlifters, only it's not what you think it is. It's about how to do life together. How to do life together. It's embracing the reality that no matter who you are, no matter how strong you are, no matter how well equipped or gifted you are, how resourced you are, at some point, you will come to an end of that. You will come to a place where you will need help. You'll have a struggle. There'll be a burden that feels more than you can carry. And of all the things that we could learn to do to or with one another that would be transformative, there may be none more than this: to learn how to bear one another's burdens. To bear one another's burdens. It's a mantra. These one another's are like a mantra through the Scriptures, through the New Testament. And I just kept, this whole series, I keep thinking that, and maybe that was why it was in my mind as I was writing this, because I feel like the points today are coming out like mantras, like they're coming out with a little bit of sing-songiness to them, a little bit of rhythmic rhyme to them. And I'm hoping, praying, that maybe one of these really hits so that you can take this concept of burden bearing and make it real life, reality in your life. These are the things that I see and the motivations that I see behind the church being what she was in those earliest days. Here's the first one about burden bearing. Burden bearing others' weight is a follower's trait. It's a follower's trait. It's a non-optional trait. This is Jesus 101. Jesus came to lift burdens. So if we follow Jesus, we lift burdens too. Bearing others' weight is a follower's trait. We're following his heart, his instruction, his story. If you were to look at the people that Jesus interacted with in the Gospels, you'd see this a lot. You'd see that you could kind of summarize the encounter or the interaction that he had with somebody by saying, by the end of it, a weight was lifted. A weight was lifted. He had a way of putting people at ease, and part of the reason he put people at ease is because he took what was burdening somebody and he took it off of them. All of us breathe easier when we're less burdened. All of us breathe easier when we're not crushed by a challenge or a situation. And you can look at these stories, and there's stories of physical burdens that were lifted, relational burdens that are lifted, financial burdens that are lifted, emotional burdens that are lifted. We know that there was no burden lifted like the sin burden that he came to lift. That's why he came. He ministered to all forms of burden in the human experience, but he came to lift the sin burden that plagued you and I. The rebellion that's deep-seated in our heart that put a weight of guilt and shame on us, that there was no way out from, a rock we could not move. We were being crushed under until he took the burden on himself at the cross. Not his burden that he deserved, but our burden that he gladly took. so that he could gift us his grace. He died in our place. As he said in John 15, verse 13, greater love has none than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. I saw this verse posted this week on a 9/11 tribute. And I, like many of you, remember where I was that day. And I remember the experiences and the thoughts and the emotions of that day. And I also remember, and will never forget, the stories of the heroes of that day who ran to the rubble, not away from it. And of the survivors, you would hear story after story and account after account that sounded something like this. I was trapped underneath the weight, and I couldn't move. And I cried out for help, and somebody came and lifted the burden, lifted the weight off of me so that I could get free. You know, many of those people never made it out. Some of those who tried to help ended up doing so at the cost of their own life. Greater love knows none than this, than someone lay down their life for his friends. Jesus said in the hours prior to his death on the cross, just as I've loved you, you also love one another. Part of the way Jesus loved people was by lifting their burdens, by making it his purpose and his agenda in his day to see people and the struggle that they are going through, the difficulty that they're going through, and to say, that's what I came to do. Therefore, we, as his followers, bearing others' weight is a follower's trait. It's what we do as his disciples. It's not an uncommon thing. It's not a Navy SEALs only Christian thing. It's everybody who wears the name of Christ follower. Our job, our mission, simplified, is we lift burdens off of people. We talk here about helping people. This is our mission, helping people take next steps with God. There are a lot of people who can't take their next step with God because they are burdened with something. They are burdened with something. And sometimes that conversation that we need to have before we talk A, B, C, D, what's your next step is, how can I help lift burden off of you so that you can take those steps? Imagine telling someone who's trapped under the rubble, here's your first step, when what they need is someone to help them. They need someone to lift the weight off of them. This is what we do, guys. And we do it because it has been done for us first in Christ. The motivation behind it is almost like that of regifting. In fact, I'll say it this way, a burden lifted needs regifted. As the burden's been lifted off of you, there then becomes the motivation for you to do the same for other people. Now, I start saying gift, and you guys start thinking presents, and you start thinking presents, and you start thinking Christmas. Thank you. Today is 100 days till Christmas. Did you know that? You won't remember anything else I talk about today, but you're going to remember that. It's 100 days till Christmas. The anxiety level of some moms just went up. I just felt it. They didn't carry that burden when they came in, but they're going to walk out with it. Oh my gosh. There's some checkbook balances that are going to be reviewed after service today to go, should we start spacing it out now? Because in 100 days, here it comes. Here it comes, right? I think of gifts. And some of the best gifts that I got were gifts that I could share with others. Some of the best things I received. 1987 Nintendo Entertainment System changed my life. Changed my life. Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt and Tecmo Bowl, Contra, all the good ones. Yeah. But it didn't just change my life. I mean, what it changed, I had these experiences with my buds that's like part of childhood that I'll never, it was a gift that was given to me that was best experienced when it was shared with others. A bike. A bike's a great gift to give a kid. You got to give a kid a bike. He's got to ride a bike. I loved a couple different times as I grew, I got different bikes. But you know where the bike was most enjoyed? Not on my own private bike ride, not as a kid. You want to ride in the bike gang around the block with everybody else. That's where it's fully experienced. One year I got a basketball goal for Christmas, put out in the driveway. That's an incredible gift. And I would go out there and shoot for hours and have a lot of fun by myself. But the most fun was when we shared with others. And when the buds came over, when the bros came over and played 3-on-3 in the driveway, laughing, eating Doritos and drinking Mountain Dew and going back out and playing some more. That was living. That was living. When we got married, Jamie and I got 5 crock pots as a gift. Yeah, I mean, everybody needs a crock pot. I mean, really, honestly, like side note, the whole crock pot conversation has somehow gone really sideways in our household. And I'm a little upset about it because the kids are just like, if it's in a crock pot, it's no good. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I love walking in the door and not doing nothing, and it's just ready to eat right when I walk in. Like, there's nothing better than that. But they don't cook. They don't pay for nothing. You know, it's just, they'll come to find out. They'll come to find out. Everybody needs a crock pot, but nobody needs 5. And, you know, we had these, and we don't have receipts for them. We don't have, you know, it's just like they're brand new. What do you do? There was no Facebook Marketplace back then. So we just had them sitting in our apartment for the longest time. Well, then this started to happen. Friends started getting married. I know what they're getting. I know what they're getting. And it was like, for the next 4 or 5 weddings, we had a perfect gift specially picked out right there for you. It didn't cost me anything. I already got it, and now I'm going to give it to you, brand new, right? That is the dynamic of life and faith and grace and burden carrying. It's what we've received, we then pass on. What I'm saying is what God does in you is never meant to just stay with you. It's meant to come to you in your moment of crisis, in your moment of difficulty, and then flow through you to somebody else in their moment of difficulty. 2 Corinthians chapter 1 says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord and Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God." It's reciprocal. It's about regifting. The burden lifted needs regifted because people are hurting everywhere. 100 years ago, a pastor who went by the pen name Ian McLaren made this astute observation about life. He said, "Be kind, because everybody's carrying a heavy load that you don't know anything about." As I ponder in this room right now, or with those who are watching online, just in our group, the amount of burden that exists, it's almost like I see imaginary backpacks full of weight looking around the room that are on your shoulders. Physical burdens, financial burdens, relational burdens, emotional burdens, maybe sin burdens. You know, the context actually of Galatians 6:2, the verse we read, "Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ." The context of that verse is actually sin burden. And it's like the burden that's connected to the ramifications of sin. What I mean is you can be forgiven and you're still going to deal with consequences after that sometimes. You're forgiven, but there's still junk that follows, right? Being a burden bearer for someone who has junk that's been forgiven but still present, that takes love and commitment and a special kind of muscle. But that's what doing life together sometimes requires. It's not just I'm going to make you some meals when you're sick. It's like I'm going to walk with you when you made a mistake and on the other side of the mistake and the pain and the grief that's there. I'm not condoning anything, but I'm walking with you on the other side of it. That's bearing burdens. Now listen, there's hurt everywhere, but there's also opportunity everywhere. Opportunity everywhere for the people of God to take what's been given to them, the gift they've received, and to re-gift it on a day in, day out basis. I say this as a clarion call for people who are maybe a little too romantic about what God's will is for you in your life. I've lived in a season or seasons like that, where I've dreamed about, God, what do you want to do in my life? How do you want to use me? What do you want to do with me? And it was always going to be something grand and big. And I would overlook the opportunities that were right there in front of me in the moment that God had for me to do ministry in. I had a professor one day, as I was painting this picture of where life would be down the road and what God might be calling me to do, said, "You know what you need to worry about? is not being God's man in 10 years. You need to worry about being God's man today. Today. Who is it today that he wants you to love? Who is it today that the opportunity is in front of you to rearrange your life or your finances or your schedule for, so that you can help them? Yes, it'll cost you, but you will know that you're being used powerfully by God in a person's moment of need, so that they can take their step of faith and finish their course that God has called them to. Look, bearing one another's burdens, it's part being willing and aware that there's hurting people everywhere and we need to respond. But let me speak to the other side of this conversation now, because it is also part people have to be transparent and open. You got to open up your life. You got to open up your world. What I'm saying is, without sharing, there's no help bearing. Without telling somebody or opening up your life, there's no, sometimes, way for people to help. There are some of you know who you are in the room, who are the first person to deliver the meal when somebody's in crisis, the first person to make the call when somebody needs a listening ear, the first person to let somebody vent about their stupid boss or whoever it is at work that's driving them crazy. But you're the last person to say, hey, I need to share something with you. Hey, I need to help. I need help. But this is a two-way street, this bearing one another's burdens. It's a two-way street. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 17 says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. This is one of my favorite verses, and I feel like this is, like, when stuff gets crazy, I feel like I become most engaged in a moment when everything in life is going bonkers. Because I feel like this is why I'm here. This is where there's help needed. This is where there's leadership needed. But I'll tell you where I stink at this is on the other side of the equation. Saying, hey, you know what? The adversity is mine. And I need somebody to come into my life and to help me through it. I'll tell you the reason why I struggle to ask. These are probably the same reasons that you struggle to ask for help when you really actually need it. One is because you don't want to be a burden. Because you go back to that backpack illustration and you go, everybody's carrying weight. Everybody's overwhelmed. Everybody's going through something. So I'm not going to burden them with my struggle or with my issue, because I don't want them to wear any more weight than they're already wearing. Sometimes we forget that with the people that we love, you got to give them permission to make that judgment call. Secondly, we do it because we're embarrassed. We don't tell people because we're embarrassed to be vulnerable. Because we think that by being vulnerable, they will open us up to shame. We'll have to retrace a decision we made that was stupid, or a thought process that wasn't very sound, or something. And we would rather them have a better view of our intelligence level or our decision-making skill than what the reality actually was. What I'm saying is that I know that there are people in this room who are struggling in ways that nobody knows about because you won't tell anybody. And we'll never really see the fullness of what God has for us if we can't get past that. Understand when I say that, I'm not even talking about capital C church around the world. That's true. I'm talking about us, guys. I'm talking about this special little thing that God's doing right here with us. We have an opportunity to carry and walk with each other through life in a way that requires us to be a two-way street. And sometimes we don't like to share until it just absolutely all breaks down. If you've been there before, if you are there now, can I tell you you're in good company? I go back to that Moses story at the beginning. Moses in that battle where Aaron and Hur were holding his arms up. There's zero account of any hesitation that he had to their help. None. He accepted it and embraced it and knew that if they were going to win that battle, he was going to have their help doing it. But he wasn't always that way. And he led in a very solo way for much of his ministry. But he had a moment 6 chapters earlier where he broke down and said, I can't do it this way anymore. He had led the nation, 2 million people out of Egypt. They're heading on their way to the promised land. It's like a big, giant road trip. If you can imagine in your mind what it would be like to lead 2 million people on a walk where there's no food and God is miraculously providing day by day. I've been on a road trip with 5 people in a van, and after one day, I'm done. Like, take me out. Like, take me out of here. Like, I had a Griswoldian fantasy at the beginning of this trip, but that is over. It is now a nightmare. Take me out. That's exactly what Moses said to God. Numbers chapter 11, verse 11. Moses said to the Lord, why are you treating me so harshly? Have mercy on me. What did I do to deserve the burden of all these people? Did I give birth to them? Did I bring them into the world? Why did you tell me to carry them in my arms like a mother carries a nursing baby? How can I carry them to the land you swore to give their ancestors? Where am I supposed to get meat for all these people? They keep whining to me, saying, give us meat to eat. I can't carry these people by myself. The load is too heavy. But if this is how you intend to treat me, just go ahead and kill me. Do me a favor and spare me this misery. I mean, he tapped out. I'm done. I'm done. And God said, all right. All right. I'm listening. I'm listening. This is verse 17. He says, Moses, I'll come down and I'll talk to you there. And I'll take some of the spirit that's upon you and I'll put it upon them also. And they will bear the burden of the people along with you so that you won't have to carry it alone. God does this. Spreads out that load onto some guys. It took 70 men to spread it all out, what he had on his shoulders. He was carrying more than what he could humanly carry. The burden was too great for him to bear. And so God said, Moses, you can't do it alone. I'm going to bring some people into your life. No wonder he felt crushed. Took 70 men to take that load and appropriate it on his shoulders. He needed other people in his life. He had to be willing to be real with God and with some other people to say, I do need your help. I do need to share. I am overwhelmed. I am burned out. I am struggling. This is frustrating me. I am depressed. This is more difficult than I thought it would be. I don't think I can continue. And it's in those type of expressions and phrasings that one another happens. That someone has the opportunity to see a burden that was invisible until you said it. And now that you've said it, they see it. And they can lift that burden and walk and help you carry it away. Because this is that incredible life that God has designed for us to be able to live together. Not just for a biological family to experience, that's part of it, but I'm talking for our church family to be able to experience. So that's why I want to call you to respond in 2 ways. 1, if you've never felt the burden of sin lifted off of you, this is the conversation that needs to lead. Because until you receive Jesus' forgiveness for sin, and you embrace what he accomplished on the cross by faith through grace, you will be forever burdened by that weight. But you don't have to live like that. And you can receive a gift that he offers to you. You can do that today. So as we sing here in just a moment, if there's a decision for Jesus that you'd like to make, I'll be standing at the back. I'd love to meet you and help you take that step. After service, go to the Connect kiosk straight away out in the lobby. We'd love to help you take that step. But having taken that step, there is a life that God calls you to be like him and to lift the burdens of the people who are around you. To go into life situations with an eye for the struggle that other people are having and a desire to help make a difference, not for your glory, but out of gratitude for what God has done for you already in your life. Jesus bore the weight of your sin, so how in gratitude can you then look to the weights that others are carrying? I got a feeling that God might even bring a person or a situation to your mind today. Know that that's not accidental if he does so. That's God already speaking some direction to you on where you might look to help. But may we be a people who, increasing measure, are transformed by the weight that God has lifted off of us through his son Jesus, and the weight that we lift off of others out of love and reverence for one another. Will you stand with me?